Welcome to the Sterning Human Resources podcast, where we provide insights and discussions on all things related to the human resources community. At Sterning, we are dedicated recruitment professionals with deep networks in the HR industry. We specialise in sourcing HR professionals on a temporary or permanent basis and are committed to delivering tailored advice and the ideal results while maintaining the highest standards of service, integrity, and quality control. Our podcast will keep you up to date with new HR roles, thought leadership posts, industry discussions by subject matter experts, and updates on the HR market. Join us as we discuss topics such as generalist HR, learning and development, remuneration and benefits, industrial relations, OD, HRIS implementations, change management, recruitment, and much, much more. Today, we're joined by Charlotte Rose. Charlotte is a professional coach, NLP Master and Trainer, L&D specialist, and change management practitioner. Charlotte has 15 years of experience as a leadership and performance coach across 30 countries. And prior to people development, Charlotte led teams and business units in international sales and business development, government relationships, and sales enablement across media, tech, medical device, and not-for-profit industries. Charlotte is an amazingly engaging person and really does bring the best out in people and has the ability to really impact teams and bring them to life. So I'm going to be asking Charlotte some questions today around leadership, especially around vulnerability and the new way of working. Thank you, Charlotte, for joining me today.
Thanks, Em, and thanks for such a nice introduction. We don't get that very often, do we?
It's a nice way to start Friday.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice of you.
Oh, thanks for being here. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions, if that's okay.
Great.
Fantastic. So first question is around changed expectations. So what are the changed expectations and needs of leaders in today's world, so post-COVID? And how are flexibility, compassion, and genuine care playing a role?
Oh, such a good question, Em. I actually love that we're kicking off with this. It's been front of mind in the industry, hasn't it?
Yes.
When we think about leadership and the change we're seeing in leadership, first and foremost, we have to ask ourselves, well, in the first instance, what is the role of a leader anyway, irrespective of what's going on in the environment? And I think, if you ask different people in different cultures and different places what it means different things to different people. But certainly in the markets that I've worked with and with people that I've had the pleasure and honor of working with, the heart of all of it is getting the right people in the right places and empowering them to get the most out of their potential in alignment with the business, organizational, or team goals, right? And so if we look at that, I mean, for me, at the heart of all of it really does sit servant leadership, because the way we get the best from and with people is really by understanding what it is they need from us. And that's really where I think your question around, well, what's changed becomes so important. If we look at it, and I would love to hear what you were doing, March 2020, do you remember where you were and what you were doing and what was going through your mind at the time, Em?
We were planning a holiday and my brother was about to get here from Vancouver.
Yeah, and I think you'd be joined by a lot of people saying they had these plans, right? This is what the year was going to look like. And that really does sit at the heart of what's changed in my opinion in such a big way. Two core things that have massively adjusted, which is the environment itself. So if we look back, I don't remember a leader that I spoke with in March of 2020 that said, yep, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do right now. I think a lot of us we're trying to figure out, well, where do we go from here? And what is the best thing for us to do in this moment? And the reality is that environmental shift hasn't really changed. So we can talk about VUCA, not a new term. It's been around since the 80s. That perspective on volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's something we should expect to hear more of in this environment today. continuous supply chain issues, artificial intelligence. What does that mean for us? ChatGPT, hot topic right now. We're looking at structural changes. We're looking at how it is that we ensure that we're navigating this continuous conversation around globalization and the shifts that we saw took place then. Now, all of that peels back to, okay, so what as a leader does this mean for me? And I think when we hear what it is people are asking for from their leaders right now, we do know that 70% of work well-being sits with, well, what is the relationship I have with my manager? And so there are 4 C's that I've put together in order to sort of help navigate this conversation with leaders in this moment. And for me, the first really does sit with the conversations I get most, the calls I get most, which is, I'm considering whether this is the right fit for me or the right leader for me or the right organization for me. And a lot of that sits with, how am I understood by my leader? So my first C is compassion. When we talk with our leaders, how are you feeling seen, heard, understood as a whole person? Because if we look at that changed expectation really lately around flexibility, that looks different and means different things for different people, right? So, am I being understood? Am I being valued? Am I somebody that feels like I have a good sense of belonging here? And the fastest way that leaders can really foster that sense of compassion and trust with their people really does sit with, well, how vulnerable are you willing to be? How much are you willing to share also of yourself as you bring yourself to those conversations? How psychologically safe are you creating the space around you for people to really show up as their full and whole selves, right? So where there's judgment or the sense of needing to fit in, then we do lose an element of people's sense of belonging. So that compassion of, do I have a leader who just gets me and appreciates me as I am and values me and is open with me? Am I able to have an open dialogue? Critical.
Yeah.
The second, and I would say right now, incredibly important, is communication. And by that, I mean, nothing we haven't heard before in the leadership space, right? But inspiring communication around vision and where it is we're all going, because there is turbulence and our brains don't like it. We as humans and as people, we like status quo, we like comfort, we like to know what's happening. Part of the challenge of COVID and beyond has been, well, what's happening now? And it's a huge mental load and an energy drain at times. It's hugely exciting and it's full of opportunity. And so the leader that is able to create inspiring vision, inspiring communication about where we're going, and create clear sense of priority is the one that's going to win in this space.
Yes.
I think we hear, and I don't know about you, Em, but I'm hearing a lot around, I am just so busy, I'm flat out, I'm exhausted, I'm drained, I'm feeling burnout. And you hear that not just here in the Australian market, but in the global market, right? And so making sure that we are clear about why what we're doing is important, where it is we're going, and really what it is that's most important to focus in on as changes continue to occur is absolutely critical.
Yes.
So the first of the 2 C's. And then I have my 2 focal skills that for me, I really see these as game changing. And I know you and I have spoken aside about my passion around these 2 areas. The first being change leadership, something that we really, really need to get to grips with. Change management has always been something that is considered a useful and valuable skill. Change leadership is really stepping up in that space and taking it one step further. So it's not just what needs to happen, but as a change leader, how am I really installing a mindset of, I want each and every person to bring to the table their insights and challenge the status quo. I want you to challenge where it is we're going and how it is we're getting there, so that we are coming up with the best playbook as we navigate situations and challenges as a team, as an organization, or just as an individual. So what are we being willing to try, potentially fail with, and learn from as we go? The learning needs to be the most important piece. If we continue to try play safe and do what we've always done, we are going to risk falling behind in the same way that if we'd done what we'd always done through COVID, we wouldn't succeed, right? So opportunity in that space, and with that, the importance of really understanding energy management as change leaders. It is a huge lift for people to continue to navigate constant changing environment. And so as we look at that, how do we best support people through that journey and process?
Yes.
And so with all of that, the last thing, and for me, quite possibly the most important skill any leader can develop, really is then around the coaching. It's the amplifier. It's how you end up supporting yourself and not risking burnout by trying to do everything and be the answer for everything. In this changing environment, I think it's so important that we coach people to do their best with their strengths. Thankfully, we're all different. I am thankful every day for your constant support and guidance as a friend, with your strengths and the fact we have this fabulous podcast. But really, as a leader, right, recognizing we have brought in talent with different strengths. They are going to approach things in totally different ways, thankfully, see things different ways, thankfully. And so really stepping into the next level of coaching to support, we don't necessarily have a game plan. We don't necessarily have a playbook, but we are going to find the best way together, because I'm going to ask you great questions instead of directing you. And I think that really supports people's sense of autonomy in this market, which is so important to that sense of ownership and achievement within work. So for me, they're the 4 C's. Bottom line: compassion, communication, coaching, and change leadership.
I love that. And so like that curious mindset is obviously really important in all of those areas as well.
Yes,
And so how does a whole person view impact leadership effectiveness? And why is it important for leaders to consider the holistic well-being of their team members?
Oh, such a good one. As we think about this, work-life harmony is just becoming so important, and it is an increased expectation that we talked about flexibility, and we hear a lot of sort of expectation changes around this over the last 24 months. I think there are 2 parts of this. First of all, what work-life harmony looks like is very different for different people. What's important to people from a well-being perspective is very, very different for different people, depending on where you're up to in your life and what's going on for you. And so I love your question, because I think it really speaks to the importance of understanding individualized and whole person conversation. If I don't understand you and I don't understand what's important to you as a person, the likelihood of me connecting with you as a leader and supporting what it is you need fully, I can have the best intentions in the world, but my impact's going to be off. And so really getting to understand that is incredibly, incredibly important. And if I reflect back, even in my own well-being journey, it's a point of fascination for me, because I have not had a straightforward line with this. As somebody who personally and sharing a little bit openly here, suffered with burnout twice, somebody who was hospitalized once with burnout in my early 20s, I was a person who really did not have a good grasp on really understanding work-life harmony or well-being to its fullest. In my early 20s, I'd been early promoted from a manager to a leader of leaders, and I was just desperate to make things work. I wanted my customers to be the happiest they'd ever been. I wanted our teams to be the most successful they'd ever been. And the reality is I was putting 10 out of 10 into my work career bucket for my well-being, and I let my health slip. I let my emotional well-being slip. I not proudly would say, even my family and friends would probably say, like, she's present when she's with us, but when she's not with us, we don't even know how to get hold of her. But planning holidays around all my work engagements, I think I was very much out of whack for a period of time there. And I've become since fascinated by the questions around how do we sustain our energy? How do we ensure we build resilience in a way that allows us to succeed in our careers for the long term, not in short sprints? And so I think as I've really delved into this space, a couple of things for me have really stood out, both in terms of my own reflections, but also what I see as I coach and support others. And I think some of the core questions we have to ask ourselves really do sit with, well, what actually fills my bucket? Because if I look back and I reflect, work was such a big driver for me. Work in the media industry was so engaging and so much fun. And I really wanted to succeed and perform, but it came at the cost of my personal relationships. And actually, when I look back, and now this is a true North Star for me, there is nothing more important in my life than my family and my friends, right? And so making sure that that's taken care of, and health, which is going to sustain you for the long run, is taken care of. I actually have to factor in as number 1 and 2 priority for me in how it is I map out my weeks and my months. Am I making sure that I'm taking care of those things? Because if those things fall, over the long run, it's actually going to cost me from a productivity perspective, from a sustainability perspective, because it doesn't matter how much I love what I do, it's withdrawing from the things that are going to sustain me in the long run, right?
Yeah.
And so key questions I think we as leaders have opportunity to ask, or we as coaches, if you're also in the coaching sphere, need to ask the people that we are working with is really, where do you see yourself thriving? What are the moments that bring you the greatest joy? Because if we're in survival mode, we are certainly not in a thriving mode, right? And that's where we begin to see a shift towards more of that burnout, more of that that lack of real success over long term. Are we then focusing in on core priorities? So we can try overcook things and do too much. So in any one of those spaces, in which case, again, we end up costing ourselves from a productivity perspective. So I like to use a life wheel as a coach. It looks at physical, mental, social, financial, career well-being, and really getting people to think about, what does success look like for me as a whole person in all of these areas? Knowing that I can't be necessarily a 10 out of 10 in every space, but I can be making strides for improvement, or at least maintaining what good looks like in many of the spaces. And at times even saying, look, in order for me to maintain this, I may need to take a drop down in some of these areas too, but I take that consciously now and at choice. And so that changes the conversation too. So I think for me, as we look at that whole person, that well-being question, it's really getting to the heart of, what are your drivers? What brings you joy? How do you inject more joy in your day? How do you inject more joy and more of those big ticket items for your life in your overall months and years? And especially for new leaders, if we do have any of those listening in, I have to say this is probably the space in which I spend most time having these conversations, because I do think as new leaders, we tend to go into an overdrive of trying to prove ourselves without perhaps taking a step back and looking at, how do I plan for honest, sustainable success and productivity, which is always going to drive better results long term for all of us, right? Not just you, but also your people. So that'd be the key pieces I'd say there. Just really, really checking in, what is important to me as a person, what's important to my people as individuals.
That's fantastic. I love that. Honest, sustainable success and productivity. It's good for you and your team. 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
So on that, can you discuss the significance of vulnerability and psychological safety in effective leadership, and how can leaders create an environment that encourages open communication and risk-taking?
Oh, I wish we'd asked this question more, because I really feel like this is at the heart of so much in what people need, especially right now. If I reflect on what the best leaders I've ever had the pleasure of working with do differently, it's this. It's the vulnerability piece. Have you ever worked with somebody who isn't vulnerable or doesn't create psych safety for you?
100%. They bristle as they walk in the door.
It's not good, right?
No.
And it's not good, I think, for the environment that we create, but for the expectations that we set, and for ongoing trust in relationships. And so if I look at what the best leaders have done differently, and perhaps take it from that perspective, the best leaders I've worked with are willing to share the challenges that they face professionally, and at times even in the work-life balance or work-life harmony piece and how it is that they've navigated that. The
Yeah.
best leaders I've worked with are open to talking about the questions they've got front of mind and the fact that they don't have all the answers yet and that they need some help and input with it, or talking about the mistakes they've made and what it is they've learned from it. What I love about the best leaders I work with, they don't just say, look, this is what happened. They'll talk about how it is they overcame it and share that story. And I think that's so empowering to others to understand what we see in the best leaders is not an untouchable or unreachable end goal. They've gone through a journey and a process, and their willingness to share with others creates so much safety for others to then do the same. And so you asked about psych safety as well as vulnerability.
Yes.
And I am constantly challenging almost anyone that I'm friends with or that I work with around how it is we actually continue to further this space, because key questions we hear within the market, and I get coaching calls from all over, so not just Australia, but it will often be around, I want to have a sense of belonging. I want to know that I can do well and grow here. And I want to know that I'm valued. And so when we look at those three things, I think it's really important that we ask ourselves, how are we creating safety for those things? So are we creating safety fully? And a self-reflection, if we're honest, right? Do I create absolute safety for the people I engage with in a day-to-day to feel like they belong exactly as they are? Like, there is not judgment and criticism from me of them for who they are as a person. The question of self of, do I truly, if I'm honest with myself, create absolute safety for people to ask questions when they don't understand something or they're trying to learn, without fear of feeling silly or like they should know that already. So sometimes unwittingly, I think sometimes it can be like, oh yeah, we spoke about this before. And it's like immediately the reaction of that is, well, should I have asked, or was it okay to ask here? So really thinking about that. And then the last piece, which for me links back to those 4 C's we talked about, which is safety to challenge. So as a leader, as an individual, do I create absolute safety for people to say, hey, like, I've been thinking about this, or I've been looking at this, and this is what I'm noticing. And I actually think we could do this differently or better. And that doesn't matter if it's in our personal lives or our professional lives, right? Creating that safety to challenge really makes us all better. Our personal spaces are probably the best practicing space for us to really deliver this well professionally too. So I think when we do those 3 things, we make it safe for people to feel like they can be who they are and they belong, they can question, they can ask any questions, and they can really challenge where there's opportunity. I think we create a space where we advance quicker and faster together. And that's really what the whole leadership space is about, right? It's about getting to those end goals and those end points in a great way with the people that we've brought on board to do that with. So I really think psychological safety and vulnerability is incredibly important, but I think it probably is more important than many realize. A lot of the things I've been asked to help people with over years has been imposter syndrome, of I actually don't feel like I'm good enough, or I feel like I'm going to get found out, or I feel like other people are perhaps better than me, or I'm going for a promotion. I want to make sure that I'm best in class. And a lot of this, especially amongst top performers, is linked in some ways to I'm not sure that I can ask for help or show the vulnerability of an area I don't get, for fear of what the repercussion of that might be, of how I'm seen, how I'm viewed, what the opportunities may come after this. And I think it would shock a lot of the people that are around them that's even a question. It's like, why wouldn't you feel comfortable to ask? And so I think so often psychological safety is assumed. Like, it's like, no, everybody feels comfortable to do that, rather than proactively driven, which is, even if I think all are comfortable to ask questions or comfortable to challenge, I'm actually going to proactively encourage that in the space today and say, what are the questions we haven't asked ourselves lately? Or what are the simple questions we should be asking ourselves here that we haven't revisited for a while?
Yeah.
What are the challenges we want to present to this way of thinking or this approach? And I just want to hear what's on people's minds. Let's go real blue sky with this. I think those types of openers make such a difference to people saying it is actually okay to say either I don't know or
Yeah.
this is what I've got front of mind at the moment.
Absolutely. And like, I know you spoke about the vulnerability of employees, but then there's also leaders, you like even referred back to it earlier when we were talking about the 4 Cs, you know, like those leaders early on in their careers trying to prove themselves. I think that vulnerability piece is absolutely critical and can sometimes be difficult because you're trying to prove yourself and you don't want anyone to think that you're not doing a fantastic job. So that permission to be vulnerable is really important across the board.
You're so right. And it's something you're particularly good with, right? It's I've always found that with you is the level of trust I have in you as a person is incredibly high because you've always been willing to show a little bit of who you are and the permission that that creates, right? Of, well, this is what's going on with me as a person now creates permission for the people in front of you to share the same. And I think that it's so important. It can't be understated in the leadership experience of, well, if I'm going to ask my people to share with me what's going on with them, where they're at, so that I can lead them best, I actually need to start and drive that conversation with, and this is who I am, and this is where I'm at, and this is my story. So yeah, it's one thing to be an open ear and be willing to listen. It's another thing to drive it proactively for trust.
Absolutely. And you know what? Early on in my leadership career, Charlotte, I was told to leave my baggage at the lift. So that vulnerability and true self at work was not a thing. I had to be a different person at work than I was.
I think we all got that advice at some point and then found how quickly it does not work well for us when we're bottling everything up and people are like, what are you doing and why are you doing that?
Yeah, or fake it till you make it. That's the worst
100
advice as well. So on to the next question. How does we've talked about coaching, and how does that coaching capability contribute to effective leadership? And how can leaders develop their coaching skills to empower and support their team members?
Such a good one. So this is where I absolutely spend the bulk of my time. It's something I see so much, the unlocked potential, right? And so when we think about what happens so much with leaders as they grow in that leadership journey is just the coaching piece becomes non-negotiable. I will never, ever forget my first role as a leader of leaders and realizing how little control I had over what was happening at a customer level with the teams being run by my teams, right? And I remember thinking, there is no way you can actually sustain the level of detailed knowledge you have in the market. It is impossible to run a business unit and be that granular. And so as we look at it, I mean, it was my first realization, you're just going to have to coach people to the best that they can do, because otherwise you personally are going to burn out and you are going to be exhausted trying to be across everything. But not only that, it's super disengaging, right? For the people reporting in. So, I mean, I'll never forget there was a business I worked with and I was called in to work with 3 leaders, and the first made me really intrigued because their first perspective was, well, I'm a micromanager and that's just how I do things, right? Like I'm across everything and every detail. And I thought, this is interesting. How do your team feel about that, do you think? And we sort of had a big conversation around impact and perspective. The second leader I worked with there had said, I coach people through the meeting. So I coach them on the meeting and I make sure that we get the outcome that we're looking for. And I thought, interesting, right? Like, so you are very much talking them through how they would best approach it and making sure that the outcome you're seeking is driven. Good. But then the third person in this team that I worked with was a coach, and she said, I coach people to be the best that they can be in all areas. So I coach the person as a whole.
Yeah.
After a year of each of their different approaches, the third leader had better results by threefold. And that for me was the heart of what it is great coaches, great leaders do differently. It's really understanding the importance of going deeper beyond just the topic and the content. It's actually looking at the person as a whole.
Yeah.
And as I work with leaders, I'll always say, if there is no other skill you build this one. It is your biggest multiplier impact, because when you are sick, when you are on leave, when you are unavailable, when you are looking for your next promotion or your next role or your next sort of endeavor, how do you create a bench that is going to be ready to support that? And so this is the space in which we really create this. And the key thing that I would recommend any leader look to do is enhance the coaching practice, not just through what they do, but how they are. And by this, we can coach people through a topic, or we can coach people through a situation. If there's hints or sense of judgment or criticism in the way that they are, you are not going to get honesty or transparency about what's really going on the side of the coachee, right? So how we embody ourselves as coaches becomes incredibly important. Setting up a space where it's like, this is a safe space for you, where I am invested in your success as a person, not in just this particular meeting or conversation, or in you getting the right line to me right now, but really in supporting you as a person to absolute success is how we will get people to really open up and share where they're at. That's where you get the blockages. That's where you get the real derailers in thinking a mindset, because there's honesty there, right? The second thing that is imperative for coaching practice is really going deeper with the questions. And I know we've spoken about this before, again, aside, but with every leader as coach that I've worked with, so often it'll be, I already have a coaching practice. I already coach people. And I think that's fantastic if that's already part of the practice. What I have, without shadow of a doubt, found in working with leaders on deepening their coaching practice is the quality of questions and the depth with which we go can always be stronger. And so I give you an example. So often we'll hear, coachees come with things like, I'd like to get a promotion. I'd like to be working towards a promotion. Now, first line of coaching, if we were to use something like the GROW model, you'd say, well, that's a goal, right? They've given me the goal. A great coach is going to go so much deeper with this. What's important to you about that? When you say you're seeking a promotion, what does that mean to you? What is it that the promotion would be giving you? And what we find is there's a plethora of different viewpoints or drivers, everything from I'm looking for wider responsibility to I'm looking for a better financial setup, or I'm really looking for recognition and value of what it is I'm bringing, and I see this as the way. Each and every one of those responses is going to have a completely different solution to it. The I'm looking for a wider range of responsibility doesn't require a promotion. That's one possible route, but what is it that you're feeling? What is it you're needing in this moment that's going to really help you have that sense of responsibility in areas that drive you and motivate you, right? Versus the person who's perhaps looking for recognition. Again, does that need to be tied to a promotion? Possibly, but there are an abundance of other ways that we could make sure that the person's feeling seen and valued. So as we look at this, the encouragement I always have to the leaders that I work with is double down in the space. Make sure that you are the best coach that you can be, because it's going to multiply your results. It's going to multiply the empowerment of your people. It's going to multiply how it is you're able to drive your own business and organization. But then think about not just what you're doing in terms of the depth of questions and the way you're really diving into motivations and drivers, but think about how it is you're being in terms of how it is you're showing up and creating a sense of safety.
Yeah, I love that. And those deeper questions, I think it comes with practice though, doesn't it? Because you've got to be really sure of yourself. Again, going back to that vulnerability, to be able to drill down into what someone is really saying. It's really empowering.
It's all a practice, right? I mean, I love that word you use because I'll often liken it to sports. You know, you can
Yeah.
have the best tennis player in the whole world. If they haven't practiced
Yeah.
for months, are they going to win the next Grand Slam? Probably not. So, you know, as we look at this, constantly engaging in intentional practice, I think
Yes.
is what the game changer is there.
100%. And you can practice on your leader.
Yes.
Don't be
Yes.
afraid. Yeah.
Practice on
Be
everybody.
vulnerable. Yes.
Let me not tell you what to do because that doesn't tend to go that well,
No,
that often. Let
no.
me coach you through what it is you, with your strengths, your perspective,
Yeah.
think is best for you. And you will always have better results. Oftentimes better ideas than anything you'd have come up with. So
Yeah.
yeah,
100%. So that future thinking.
yes.
And in response to the need for belonging as a whole person, how can leaders focus on work-life harmony, purpose, and career development for their employees?
Mm. So good. So I think this goes back to just really, really getting in touch with self. What are the needs? What are the priorities?
Yep.
And that's both personally and professionally, like really getting crystal clear about what is actually going to move the dial. It's so easy to get on a hamster wheel and exhaust ourselves just doing what we feel like we need to do, but that's survive mode, not thrive mode. And so really shifting into what is going to be most important in terms of satisfaction, engagement, and deliverables and results is going to be key, and really thinking about that across those buckets we talked about earlier. I think that's absolutely imperative. As a leader, role modeling, right? So if I'm saying, no, I want everybody to really think about their well-being, their self-care, I want you to make sure you take time for yourself. And I'm there at 4 o'clock in the morning responding to emails, making myself available at the weekend,
Mm.
never taking downtime, not taking holidays. What is the shadow I'm casting as a leader? And so it's oftentimes, you know, that may be what drives joy for me as a person, but is it communicating the right thing to the people that are collaborating or working with me? And so being really conscious in those spaces that we don't just talk about how busy we are or what it is we're working upon, but talking about how it is we are actually living
Yeah.
the kind of well-being aspects of our lives too. Like these are the great things that are happening for me at work, and these are some of the things I'm really looking forward to or doing personally too.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that it leads into the next question that I've got, intentional leadership. And
Mm.
why is intentional leadership impact important? And how can leaders ensure that their actions and decisions positively and meaningfully impact their teams and
Yeah.
organizations?
So, in the name of vulnerability, I will share with you my truth. In the same way that I had burnout in my 20s, this absolutely was my first ever professional flop, like complete flop. It's actually what got me so interested in how it is you teach leadership. Because as a first time manager, I
Yep.
had a member of my team join my team, and she was just incredible. I remember thinking, you are a star to be. And so immediately we got working together. I could see what was potential with her. I started putting together a couple of additional assignments with a view to, in my mind, show the head office at the time how good and capable she was already, and how we should be actually readying her for a promotion
Mm.
into actually developing out her own team. So good. So you know, got her on these assignments. It was like, you know, we were absolutely humming as a team. Results were great. And I got this phone call from my colleague in Malaysia. I was working in Indonesia at the time.
Mm.
And my colleague called me and said, hey, can I ask you, you know, what's happening with this person in your team? And I said, oh, absolute superstar. And they said, well, the impression they've got is they might have done something to upset you because they've heard that they've got more assignments than everybody else that sits at their level.
Oh no.
And I just thought, oh no, I have messed this up in such an incredible way. So I
Oh,
had to have a conversation with her, and I was like, it has occurred to me that I'm trying to do something to show the head office
yeah.
how amazing you are and get you promoted the fastest track I possibly can, because you are such a star. And I had not told you that that was my intent or my plan. And I am so sorry. And so we still laugh about it now. We still laugh about it now because, I mean, she went on to be an incredible manager, an incredible director in the business that I worked at.
That's awesome.
But it was such a realization, right? Intent and impact are two different things. And I had not a hugely dissimilar situation that I recall, where I was coaching somebody and their team member, and I had a call from the manager who said, you know, I have such a talented person within this team. I'm really looking to help grow them, but there aren't more opportunities in this team, so I'm looking at things outside for them. And in the same week, I had a call from their team member who said, I just want to confide in you. I feel like, you know, I feel like my manager doesn't really value me in the team and is constantly sharing opportunities elsewhere, as though perhaps I should be not a part of this team, and just the complete misalignment of intent versus impact. And so here's the key piece when it comes to great leadership, right? Having positive intent is certainly part of it. And if you don't have positive intent for your people, that is the first point, to pull back and say, what am I actually doing as a leader here? If I am not looking to help grow and develop and empower this person, if I have bias towards this person, if I've got struggle with this person, I need to review that first of all. But then even when you do have positive intent, really reviewing, well, what is the impact I'm creating? And the one thing people cannot see or read on any person is their intent, right? How many times have you, or anybody you know, been in a conversation where it's like, that may have been what you meant, but that's not what I heard, or that's not what I understood. And that intent piece needs to be spoken. So what a difference would it have been in reflection if, with the person that I was first managing, I'd said, hey, I think you are showing so much skill and so much ability. I'd actually love to give you a couple of extra assignments with a view to start readying you for potential future roles. Would you be open and willing to take those on with a view to growing you a little bit quicker? But just that conversation would have totally changed perhaps 2 or 3 months of working experience together. If the manager who was looking for other opportunities for their person in their team had said to their team member, hey, I see you've done so much here. You're such a valued member of this team. You're a talent that we would never want to lose. And I sense that you are looking for a little bit more. Can we have a conversation where I can either understand what would help further enrich you, whether I'm reading it right, whether I am getting a correct sense that you are looking for a little bit more, or even whether you'd be open to looking, exploring other things within the organization and business that really fuel your fire. I would like to be a partner and a support with you in all senses for how it is we continue to grow what it is you're experiencing here. Can I help you with that? I mean, what a different experience to I feel like I might be getting pushed out, right? So
100%.
it doesn't matter. And I share this with the leaders I have the privilege of working with myself all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's personal, professional, intent cannot be read. We assume people know that we have positive intent. And actually, especially when we're fostering and building new relationships, taking the time to really explore and say, this is what I'm trying to achieve with you, or this is really what I'm hoping and seeking for our team. And I want to get a sense of how does that sit with you before we move into action. We'll make sure that intent is understood before the impact is created.
100%. And it goes back to your 4 C's, the communication and compassion piece, but then also the vulnerability, because it's really important that people know where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so next question, like thinking about that leadership bench, and like obviously it's quite important to develop well ahead of time.
Yes.
What are some of the experiential, like existential, but experiential activities that can help nurture future leaders?
Yeah. This is so good. So I typically break this down into different leader levels. I think it's actually really, really important. I love what you said about preparing bench ahead of time. The amount of times I've worked in organizations where, I'll ask about the 2-horse race. Who do you should always have more than just one person that you're preparing, because people's circumstances and aspirations do change. But the amount of times I've asked and that I've heard back, oh, it's going to be this person, they're going to be perfect for the role. Ask that person, is this something you'd be interested in? They say, I'd never want to undertake that role, or that's not even something I'm actually interested in furthering. I'm more interested in this over here. And it's like, your entire bench plan actually does not have legs. So really taking the time to make sure we're having two-way conversations continuously is incredibly important. Making sure that you have got more than one person there in the bench pipeline, I think, is incredibly important too. And then how do you go about developing it? So experientially, for future first-time leaders or for frontline leaders, making sure that they have opportunity to really think about how it is they build out those 4 key areas that we spoke about. So, do they have opportunity to coach others? If they don't yet, can we get them that opportunity, whether it's interns, whether it's new hires, whether it's somebody that they're just helping grow in a space that they're already exceptional at? Can we get them coaching opportunity? Can we get them opportunity to perhaps look at how it is they cultivate a little bit of sense of followership, looking at something maybe that there is going to be change management on or change leadership around? Can we get them involved in that process? Can we get them in projects where communications of that future state, that inspiring vision, and again, creation of followership, it's something they have opportunity to practice. So projects are a great one. And then lastly, really thinking about not just the communication, but really the compassion space. How do we get them to start thinking about people's drivers and what's important to them? Are we challenging them to also think about their drivers, or sharing with people what it is that they've been working on or working through, or really open to learning about? So creating in people that sense of openness and vulnerability in a practical way. So, really getting them to grips with, how do you engage others? So that can be projects, again, new hires, interns, any kind of experiential opportunity to flex in those spaces would be great. For leaders of leaders, I think this is a really important one as we develop them as bench, really getting, I think, that breadth of perspective. So, this is no longer just about the team. This is really thinking about how the team integrates into the broader business and structure. So getting them to think about, inspiring communications. Again, I would, for leader of leaders, be looking at bigger projects. So things that they can be doing where, for sure, they can't execute themselves. They are having to coach others through and towards the communication, the alignment to what it is they've communicated for vision. So broader projects that perhaps look a little bit broader than just the team that they're in, but something that integrates in with other divisions and business units is going to be really, really helpful here. Shadowing their sort of organizational leaders will be really helpful and valuable here, and stepping into spaces where they can even stand in. So, where are you going to be out, or where is it you need assistance, or where do you just not have bandwidth that perhaps I can take on some of those pieces to really learn? And then finally, at an organizational leadership perspective, I think it's really, really important to fully step into putting a business hat on, internally and externally. So starting to look at opportunities for them to really step up, again, almost like change initiatives throughout the organization. How can you identify what it is that needs to be adjusted? That's key to organizational leadership. So in preparation for that, what are you spotting and citing? How do you intend to drive that change within the organization? And can you actually be part of a team or lead a team in navigation of that through to an end result over time? And then even looking at external representation opportunities. How do you or could you do that in representation of the business as a whole, getting again outside of the thinking piece of just your business unit.
Yeah, that's really cool. Oh, it's really cool.
Have you got any other suggestions, Em?
I love the mentoring piece. I think that being able to develop that coaching ability early on in your career is that's gold.
Absolutely.
Like being able to practice that and learn from somebody. Yeah, when you're starting out, like when you're not even a leader yet. Wow, that's really cool.
And at every level, right? Because the coaching requirement intensifies at every level because you have less visibility and less touch point by nature of the role. So, you know, I always tell any exec leadership team I work with, this needs to be the best coaching team in the business, you know, because that's really where the whole culture is going to be driven by too.
Yeah, 100%. It's it's worth its weight in gold. That's why I have my kids in team sports too. And
so good.
How their coaches speak to them as well. So
learn early. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what unique development strategies can empower women to use their voices in leadership roles effectively? And how can organizations support the advance and growth of female leaders? Because we're still underrepresented in those really senior roles and at board level. So it's really important that this flows through the organization, right?
You're so right. It's, you know, it's an interesting thing, right? Because we're in 2023 and isn't it bizarre sometimes that we're like, but it's different for women still. And so, you know, as somebody who feels very passionately about not almost stereotyping or sidelining one gender over another, I think it is still important to recognize as the very real challenges and biases that are still recognized in the space of women, and the challenges are different. I've coached women all around the world, and what is fascinating to me is how consistently some of the challenges we see exist everywhere. And I do see in Australia particularly, there is quite a bit still around imposter syndrome, tall poppy syndrome, and that use of voice. So these are some of the biggest areas that I do focus in on, is that challenge around, am I good enough? Do I deserve to be here? I don't want to be the loudest person in the room. I don't want to be seen to be taking up airtime. I want to be seen to be raising my voice when other people are more experienced or perhaps have more to offer. It really is at times working through that sense of right to speak. And so we do see behaviors with women. Women apologize more. They say sorry more. It's like, sorry, I'm late. Sorry, I'm here. Sorry, may I add something? Sorry, may I just suggest? It's a really interesting thing where there's an automatic reduction in the value of what I'm about to share or my presence here. And so getting really comfortable with the fact that if you're in the room or you've been invited to the room or you're in the conversation, it's because you have a viewpoint that is worthy, right, of the environment that you've been invited to. And so I think, look, the three core things I'd say that are critical to driving leadership amongst women is first of all, really getting to a point where we are encouraging in a very real way people's voice. So if we're in a meeting and, you know, it's like, I'm really looking forward to hearing your viewpoints on this today. You know, I'm really looking forward to hearing from each and every person here. You've all been invited for good reason. And if you haven't heard from perhaps some of our women leaders so much in the conversation, I'm curious, what's on your mind as we talk about this? And that encouragement to speak and to speak up and to share, particularly for new women leaders, just goes so far. The second really is volunteerism. So we know the research shows us that there is a hesitation for self-advocacy amongst women. We know, and I'm going to totally speak to your area, so you take away and you can say, Shar, actually that's not quite right, or this is actually what I'm seeing. But the research certainly indicates, and my experience of coaches certainly has indicated that unless a woman hits 90 to 100% of the criteria in a job description or in a project role even, it's like, well, there'll probably be somebody who's more appropriate for that than me. And
Yeah.
that hesitation to hold back, is that something you're still seeing?
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's, like it's actually the catalyst to a new coaching program that Bianca and I are putting together to empower women to have the confidence to go after the roles that they don't
Yes.
necessarily, or they see and they think, oh, I don't tick all those boxes, so I'm not going to try. But there's so
Yeah.
many transferable skills and strengths that can be applied to the role that they really want.
Yes, exactly right. And so just that's exactly what I was going to say, is
Hey.
it's so important, right? To really, the encouragement, yes, but the volunteerism. So advocating for others when they are not necessarily willing to do it for themselves to begin with. It is a skill that we all need to learn, and women almost have to spend extra time learning the skill here in this space, because for whatever reason, it's been socialized that self-advocacy is almost like not okay, or there's something weird around it when it comes to women. And so the advocating for others, hey, I know that Em's amazing when it comes to engaging other people. I know Em's amazing when it comes to getting people to open up and speak about their passion areas. She actually runs a fantastic podcast. You should check it out. That kind of advocacy or encouragement of others, or putting people's hands up and say, do you know who I think would be absolutely amazing for this, and you should go and speak to them, is this person. And so if we first of all look at encouragement and use of voice, that's absolutely the first piece. It's going to help with building that self-advocacy of ideas. So these are the things I believe in, and bringing encouragement of that to the table. The second is absolutely advocacy and volunteerism of the women and the people that we see doing amazing things. And then the third thing that is actually, I think, such a small but such an easy and important thing to do is, when we have women around us who are doing great things or sharing great ideas, is actually the build. And by that, what I mean is, when we're in a conversation and somebody says, I don't know, I've got a Jenny or a Jackie or an Olivia, and they've said something brilliant. It's like, I really like what Olivia's just shared, and I really like how Jackie explained that. And building on that, what I'm also thinking is, now, if you do that as a woman or a man, you have just given the greatest gift of validating what somebody has been willing to bring to the table. And it's how we create psychological safety. It goes all back to that initial piece, right, of ensuring that we're building an environment where people can be their best and bring their best, and challenge and ask questions. So when we build, we do that, but we validate the person in their right to be in the room and share what they are. And so, if we disagree, I think it's also fine to say, I really like what you brought to the table and the way you've done it. But, I actually come from a slightly different perspective in that this is what I'm currently thinking, right? And it can be done so respectfully, in that I'm still going to build on what you said, and we're going to have an engaging conversation rather than me shutting it down and going, I think you're wrong. So, I do really, really believe that those are the three core things that we can do. I actually work as a mentor at a domestic violence and a charity. I also work as a mentor at an Aboriginal charity. And with the women that I have the honor of working with in those spaces, the biggest thing that they have shared is when they've had role models that they can look up to as women. And they weren't referring necessarily to myself, but to women that they have looked up to in their spaces, and wanting to embody that for others. That is another great way that I think we grow great female leaders, is just seeing more of them and seeing more of them in action. And so here's the thing, right? As a woman leader, there may be an inclination to say, well, I don't want to take too much floor space. I don't want to take up too much time. The reality is, women coming through the ranks need to see you in action, because where they see you in action, they know it's possible for them. And so I would really be encouraging that, and the undertaking of mentorship wherever you can. If somebody's asking for help, give it freely. And so, I'd say they're the three key buckets, in my opinion, and and how it is we can and will continue to advance women at work.
I love that. And don't apologize for taking up space.
No, please don't. It's like, let's just celebrate that you're here in the room, and that I will never forget one of the most incredible women that I've had the pleasure of working with. I'd organized a forum where one of our very most senior leaders within the organization came to speak to the group, and there was one woman that I've been working with for a long time who typically held back, and I remember sat there thinking, please share what your view and opinion is with this leader, because they are going to get so much value and insight from you. And just as the call was about to wrap up, she hadn't said anything, and I thought, what a missed opportunity, because she's so great. And he said, I hadn't heard anything from you, and I just wanted to check, is there anything else that you would like to share with me or us today? And the piece of insight she gave him and the team was the most true, honest, insightful perspective that could have been given that day. And there was relief on the call that somebody had said it, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought, he gave the greatest gift, but she took the space. It would have been so easy for her to say, no, it's okay, everything's been said, or we're at time, right? But she didn't. She took the moment. And so it requires both parts. One, a willingness to step into the space, but two, a willingness to create the space. And whether you're a man or you're a woman, you have opportunities every day of the week to do that for the women around you.
I love that. I love that. Oh, Charlotte, so we have covered so much today, and
yes,
I think it's so good. So like bringing it all together. We started off talking about empowerment and team goals and servant leadership, and understanding, really getting into the space and getting to understand what your people need and how you can support them, bringing them into the 4 C's, being compassion. So people need to understand if they're being understood. They need to have a sense of belonging. The vulnerability piece obviously helps that, but enabling people to be vulnerable while yourself is being vulnerable as a leader. Communication, inspiring communication around you. So around purpose, vision, a clear sense of priority. And that communication piece leading into that safety to challenge, but then also impact leadership. So being able to communicate in a way where you are understood rather than just heard. I think that, that impact piece is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Understood and valued always. Do I feel valued with what I'm doing too? Yeah.
Yes. And then change leadership. So stepping up in that change management space. How am I instilling a mindset to challenge the status quo? So learning needs to be the most important part. So never stop learning, never stop being curious, leading into that coaching. So the 4th C, so that amplifier, which supports yourself and your team, empowers them, builds them, plays to their strengths, and getting people to see things in a different way. So that coaching curious mindset is really important. And then of course, being able to have the space to bring your whole self to work. So understanding what fills your bucket, understanding what strengths can be used, and really building that honest, sustainable success and productivity within teams and organizations. I think that if you haven't taken something away today, you have to be listening. Wow.
I love it, Em.
There's more.
Yeah, it's like, we covered so much ground. Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the chat. As you can see, I always have too much energy when I get to talk about my favorite things, and you've just hit on so many of them. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was so nice having you here. And, if anyone wants to connect in with Charlotte and hear more of her amazing work, or understand how she can support you, then honestly, she's fantastic. And we will share this on our podcast and of course on our Purpose website. And thank you so much, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Em. Have a brilliant rest of day. The sun's out, so I hope
Yay!
you get some.
You too, my dear. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. And that concludes this episode of Sterning HR's podcast, where we've shared our insights and expertise on the latest trends and best practices in the field of HR. We hope that our discussion has been insightful and valuable to you. If you're interested in learning more about how we can help your organisation optimise its people function, please visit our website or contact us directly. We would be happy to discuss how we can partner with you to achieve your people goals. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye.